Hello and welcome to the 25th International Literature Festival in Berlin. I'm so honored and very, very happy to be here on stage together with William Hitchcock, Jamaica Kincaid, and Elizabeth Kolbert, I'm sorry, and who are here. They just got here a few weeks ago. The three are fellows at the American Academy in Berlin-Wannsee, and a peaceful haven away from the turmoils across the big pond. And if you want to see more of them this year, you can, because they will be here until December, and they will give talks and so on at the American Academy. The United States under Trump 2.0, I was in touch with Will before this event, and in an email to me, he said, well, we'll try not to simply say things are very bad. Instead, we'll take a look at how we got here, what's at stake, and also maybe take a look at future scenarios. We have three very different guests here with very different fields of expertise. We have a Q&A in the end, so think about questions if you like. And we only have 90 minutes. So prepare yourself for a night where many questions will remain unasked or unanswered. But it's good to be here anyway, so here we go. I'll introduce all three of you first, briefly. William Hitchcock, it's by alphabet, not by seating order or anything else. William Hitchcock is a professor of history and the director of the program Governing America in a Global Era at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. He studied history and French and focuses on 20th century global history, especially on the two world wars and the Cold War. He co-hosted the podcast Democracy in Danger, which ended in 2024, probably because everything is going so smoothly with democracy right now. And he has published 4 books, among them The Bitter Road to Freedom, A New History of the Liberation of Europe, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Nonfiction, The Age of Eisenhower, America and the World in the 1950s, which was a New York Times bestseller. And here in Berlin, at the American Academy, he will be working on a new book with a quite fitting title, A Shadow Over the World, American Democracy in the Age of Fascism, 1922 to 1941. Jamaica Kincaid is a writer, as you all know probably, and Professor Emerita of African and African American Studies at Harvard University. In her award-winning and widely translated novels, short stories, and essays, she reflects on family, memory, gender, colonialism, her native Antigua, and quite famously, gardening. To name just a few of her titles, of her books, Annie John from 1985, and last year, the beautiful Encyclopedia of Gardening for Colored Children, which is a co-production with Kara Walker. And most recently this year came out a collection of essays, Putting Myself Together. She's a member of the American Academy of Arts as well as the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and she will be working during her time here in Berlin on a new novel called What Cassandra, Daughter of Potter, Not Priam, Said. Last but by no means least, Elizabeth Kolbert. She has been a staff writer of The New Yorker since 1999. She's an expert on climate change and nature and environmental issues. She holds a BA from Yale University in literature, which might explain the very literary quality of her writing. She has published several books. She has edited many more, but she has published several books, among them The Sixth Extinction, which won the Pulitzer Prize for General Nonfiction in 2014. The very beautiful H is for Hope, Climate Change from A to Z, which came out last year. And forthcoming is also a collection of her pieces about climate change and the natural world. Life on a Little-Known Planet, Dispatches from a Changing World. She's a member of the Academy of Arts and Letters, and according to the Rolling Stone magazine, you need to read Elizabeth Kolbert to be a well-informed citizen of planet Earth. Here at the Academy, she will be working on a new project called Under the Glacier, How Ice Shaped Our World and Will Determine Its Future. So, I thought we might start by talking about freedom, which is obviously one of the essential terms and sentiments when it comes to the United States. And as far as I know, none of you is a late-night talk show host, but I'll ask you as a professor of history at a university, a journalist, and a black woman writer. So how free do you feel these days?
Right now? Great.
And in general? Maybe not right now.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for coming. I think my colleagues will speak for themselves, but I'm sure they would agree that we all feel really grateful to be here and to be in Germany to talk about, a trauma that we are experiencing as individuals, as citizens, and as people who live and work in America. But it feels as if there's something quite beautiful about being in Germany to work through some of this together. So thank you for coming tonight. I'll just say, I'll put myself forward. I should be the freest person in America. I'm a 60-year-old white man with tenure at a university. Nobody can touch me. But actually, that's not true anymore. So all of the things that we once knew and took for granted have been destabilized. So no one has been untouched. This has only happened, we're talking about Trump 2.0, and there's a very distinct difference between the period 2016 to 2020. That's what has made 2.0 so different, so destabilizing, is that these carve-outs, these sort of safe rooms which people sort of think they can scatter to, have been exposed. So in a sense, we don't really know how to answer the question, how free are you? Because in a sense, we may be tested at any time. And what we think is an area of freedom will be taken away.
Actually, also the question is, how free do you feel? Not how free are you? I guess it's a...
Yeah, well, that's an important difference. And, I was on a podcast for 4 years, and we said whatever we wanted to, and then the university decided they didn't want to fund our podcast anymore, which gives you an idea of the way in which things slowly, close around you. But I'm not sure, honestly, if I would feel as free to let it rip on my podcast as I did a couple of years ago, because I know that everyone's listening. People are paying attention. Words have taken on. Words come cheap, we can all talk, but now words are being examined and freighted and evaluated in a way I don't think I've ever experienced.
Well, I think it's a very weird time. I mean, we've all sitting up at this table have been, here in Berlin for the last month, but I think that there's a very weird sense of a sort of a shadow, but honestly, daily life, and I am a journalist, I will say that I have not felt any restraint on what I write at this point. The New Yorker has a super vigilant fact-checking, and that has remained the same. I think that in general, the press, there's just, the Trump administration just filed a $15 billion lawsuit against the New York Times and Penguin Random House. That is, a suit that probably isn't going to succeed, but it has a very clear message, and I think that all journalists, all news organizations are very worried. It just costs a lot of money to defend yourself against a suit like that, even if it doesn't win. So everyone is on edge, and everyone, I think, is trying to be super careful. But so I feel like we're in this sort of weird moment where we're waiting for something. Well, something terrible has happened, but where many of us are going about daily life and do not feel particularly constrained, but are wondering what's in store.
Jamaica?
Yes. Well, how do I feel? I feel as if I am in another America. I used to think of America as this wonderful place where it, with a lot of problems, though as Will says, if you looked like him, you could easily, you have to go out of your way to talk about the problems. As I listen to the two of you, and I've been thinking about this, I wonder if the average African American, which I am not, I was born in an island in the Caribbean, but if they feel, and I will ask someone, the same sense of fear and disability that you heard described, I don't feel it. First of all, I live in a small state with mostly what you call white people, and it's Bernie Sanders is my senator. And so I feel a little superior, you know. So I just, I look at these things. I came downstairs this morning and everyone was in shock because of the Jimmy Kimmel thing. And then I was in shock too, because I like Jimmy Kimmel and I like the terrible things he said about Trump. They were all true. If they weren't true, I wouldn't have liked them, but they were true. So how do you feel? Americans, and I'm just going to, you two push back on this. Americans have a feeling that when things happen, it's very bad, and then they shake themselves out of it and go on as if it didn't happen at all, or if it did happen, it was, well, one of those things. But then we move on into eras or into generations, you know, Gen Z, millenniums, blah. We don't ever have a sense of the things we do were terrible and that we lived through them. The other night, we all had to sit through a lecture by Her Majesty Condoleezza Rice, gave us a lecture about the bipolar world, the unipolar world, all sorts of worlds. And I personally was very, didn't say anything because I didn't want to get my hosts in trouble. I didn't want to seem like an ungrateful guest, so I didn't say to her, "But you're such a bitch." I did not say that. And then I felt terrible that because I usually can speak my mind fairly, and I'm willing to suffer the consequences. So this question of Trump and the things he does, I think, or things he's done, they are things that, on the whole, African Americans have lived with and didn't move to a nice house in a suburb of England when this happened. And so I think it, even though I find it shocking what's going on, but I can hear in the voices of my colleagues a kind of unbelievableness, but the violations of civil rights, the violations of laws, are very familiar to African Americans. And so maybe this actually might be one of those transforming moments, and a profound transforming moment in American life, where people who are not black but liberal will become black. And then they won't be so alarmed. They will see they can live through Don Corleone Trump.
During Trump's first term, the city streets seemed to be flooded with people, you know, with protesters, and so I saw that on October 18th, yes, there will be another No King's Day with thousands of protests all over the country. But all in all, I don't know, it seems from the outside, it seems rather silent in a way. So I was wondering, where's the protest? And thinking about that, I keep thinking about whether fear might already have done its work in a way.
I don't think I don't think so. I think, again, things take a while in America to go through, to live through this. But there will, I somehow think there will be something, because Americans never like the same things. I just told you, they have Gen Z, they have Gen... it's always something new. And so this is, you know, sort of, it's serious, but we believe, I think deep down we believe, first of all, Donald Trump is occupies a lot of non-serious entertaining figures in American history. He's a carny man, a carnival huckster. He's what do you call it? He's a thief. He's a liar. He's a rapist. He's most anything, anyone you wouldn't want your child to grow up to be Donald Trump, or generally you wouldn't want your child. And so I think that there is something will change, and maybe it will change for the worse. Now we know that a convicted rapist can become president. We didn't know that before, and we'll incorporate it in the myth of ourselves, and I think.
Well, I'll just add to that. I think that's beautifully said. But you know, the morning after this second round, I used the word trauma before, and I do think the country's, a lot of people are going through trauma, but part of what I think triggered that trauma, for me anyway, is a sense that we went into this with our eyes wide open. There could be no excuses, no surprises. This is what Americans wanted. So when I woke up on that morning, I thought to myself, you know, who are we? It turns out many of my own beliefs about the possibility of America were sort of destabilized. So this is very shocking. It takes a while to recover. You know, it's just crucial to remember that you know, it's almost hard to say, it's almost nauseating to say it, but Donald Trump won the election. You know, I mean, he didn't come from Mars. He's an expression of something that is fundamentally, I hate to say it, fundamentally, the evidence is in front of us, fundamentally American. And this is just really hard to digest. So, you know, the 1.0 was a little different. It felt a bit like a contingent event. A few thousand votes here and there, we told ourselves. It could have gone differently. Not the second time. So this is us, and we're dealing with that. We're coping with that. And if I think Jamaica's right, we'll get there, but it's really, really hard to process.
Elizabeth?
No, I don't have a tremendous amount to add to that. I think that that's a key point, and the question that we're really grappling. I mean, you're saying where's the protest? I do think that's a good question, because I do think there is, a solid half of America that is very, very opposed to everything that Donald Trump stands for and is doing. So I do think it's a very legitimate question. Now, we're not a country that does do general strikes, or we're a country with a very weakened labor movement, and Donald Trump is doing everything he can to further that. So a lot of the organizations and groups that you would depend on to organize mass protests are also being eviscerated. But I also do think that and I don't think we've gotten there yet, that we do have to fundamentally ask ourselves who we are at this point. And that is very, very painful. And maybe we are this country. There's that famous Winston Churchill line. I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe Will. You can depend on Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted all the other options. And I think we are in the process of exhausting every other option. And the question of whether we will emerge at the end of this is the question that everybody who is in that 50% is asking themselves right now.
Can I add one more thought to this? This is a crucial point about the institutions being hollowed out, but they're also being viciously attacked. So one place you would look for protest is universities. Well, as I'm sure you all have noticed, universities are, the leadership of universities are caving, but students are actually protesting. They have taken risks. They have put themselves into very dangerous situations. And they paid a terrible price. I mean, my own university, which is, a lot of people would say is a kind of culturally conservative university in the South, we had about 12 students erect a couple of pup tents on our grassy lawn to protest the atrocities in Gaza. They had the SWAT team on them with pepper spray in about 24 hours. Now, this is what's happening. So, it's not that the protests aren't there, it's that they are actually being extinguished very effectively.
I'd like to, speaking of Trump actually won the election, I have a question for Elizabeth, because I looked at the Yale climate opinion maps from 2024, and it's incredible because actually 72% of US adults believe that climate change is happening. 63% all over the country are worried about global warming. And it's just, of course, one of many topics. I mean, you always wonder, how can a woman elect Donald Trump? But so how come that these worries apparently didn't play any role in the 2024 elections?
Well, that's sort of unfortunately a recurring theme in climate politics, that the issue, even as public concern and has mounted, and it sort of tends to wax and wane, but has over time generally mounted as people see, climate damage in their own communities, in their own backyards many times. But if you look at, when people do those polls where they come up with what's top of mind, what's most salient to them, it's almost always, the economy, immigration, what we'll call hot button issues. And climate change and environmental issues in general tend to rank very low in American opinion, when you give people the chance to rank things. So you can unfortunately, and I think that's true of many issues in the US, you can feel that way. But and it's one of the great mysteries of Donald Trump. I mean, one of the things that we're all working out. How can it be, that a country in which the majority of people believe in abortion rights, how can they have elected Donald Trump? All of these things, you can go down the list and ask yourself, how did that happen?
I was also, that's a question that I've been wondering for a long time, because the current government would call themselves conservative, which is debatable, I guess, but and many members publicly emphasize their Christian faith. And also most of them have children or grandchildren. And so one would think that preserving creation, environment and so on would be important to them. And instead, what we're seeing is there's a great book by a German journalist and author Christian Stöcker, which is entitled "Men Burning Down the World." And so I was wondering whether you have an explanation for this contradiction.
No. No, it's a terribly profound question, and people have tried to pose it to the heads of major oil companies in the U.S. But definitely, right now, what you are seeing in the U.S. is sort of a fire sale on both on public lands, which are being opened up to all sorts of timbering and mining and oil drilling, and definitely climate policy, not just going after Biden-era tax breaks that were supposed to encourage both manufacturing jobs, interestingly, and many of them in red states, and clean energy production, but really actually very, very vigorously trying to prop up and encourage fossil fuel production. And you see this in Europe, that the U.S. is coming to Europe and say, you've got to buy our natural gas, even as Europe is making, I'm not going to give them that much credit, but I'm going to give them some credit for making much more of an effort than the U.S. is to wean themselves off fossil fuels. And then you have the U.S. actually coming and saying, you've got to buy our fossil fuels. So it's really, it couldn't be, a sort of a worse situation in that respect.
Jamaica?
Well, it's not the entire answer, but a big part of the American imagination, most of us, is we're preoccupied with money. And I will leave you to characterize it how you like, capitalism, whatever, but it's, money. So Joe Biden was blamed because eggs cost $3 more. And that was inflation. So you used to pay $6 for eggs, and now you're paying $9, and that was just the reason to get rid of a president. Or your gas was for your car cost $1 more. The god of money, the American dollar, as we used to say in the West Indies, the Yankee dollar, is very important for the Yankee. So yes, you have to buy American gas, as that horrible woman told us the other night, that how she knew this. It's sort of interesting to me, because it's not the kind of thing I would pay attention to, but that the infrastructure of Russian gas production was falling apart. It was like a housekeeping detail for her. And so if it's falling apart, then we have an opportunity to make money. The problem with America and money is that it gets less and less evenly distributed. So you will have groups of people fighting, or not fighting like in a club or something, but standing opposed to each other. One of the fault lines that perhaps you two will mention, is that on the whole, Americans, what you call white Americans, I hate those words, but I'll give you an idea what I mean. White Americans would rather be poor than be equal. And so they often, that is a line of political attack that Republicans especially have used, that black people mustn't have more than they. And a part of the American freaking out over China is that China may become, I don't know, whatever, but something that worries them about China, becoming more powerful or equally powerful. The other day when I saw a Chinese parade, and I'm a very, I think, left-wing person, but I really was admiring it. I thought, oh, we can't do anything like that. But I think, you know, the issue of money, which is one of the reasons all these corporations are caving. They don't have enough money. I don't know what you do with this money, but they don't have enough of it.
I totally agree with that, yeah. But I also think that the issue has been demagogued in a way that's very unhealthy. So inflation, my gas is 5 cents more than it was, or a quarter more than it was last year. This is one of the biggest political, shenanigans that's been pulled in a long time. It's a way of saying, this is what I care about, so I'm going to pull the lever in this direction. But it doesn't require you to own up to all the other atrocities that are now going to be that are going to happen once you pull that lever. And I think this is one of the reasons that people clung to it so desperately. My gas is too expensive. But what is it masking? It's masking an ideology, a really, really profound ideology. You know, Americans are often thought to be sort of elastic. We don't have any core ideologies. We're promiscuous. Politically, we're all over the map. I mean, there is a really powerful ideology at work in America today. Yes, it's about capitalism and exploitation. Yes, it's about extraction of oil and wealth from the ground. But people, it's also about racism. I mean, we've been already sort of hinting at this, but racism is central to what's happening in America, and it's not new, but it has been accelerated in a way that is extraordinarily powerful and extraordinarily dangerous. And racism has to be cloaked in so many in certain acceptable costumes. Inflation might be one of them. Biden's too old is another one of them. I mean, you take your pick. There's a long list of these things. But there's no other way to fundamentally explain that Donald Trump have a different point of view than pretty much all of his supporters, and yet they still are loyal to him without the one constant thread that they all share, which is a fundamentally racist view of the world. This is the American burden. It's 400 years old. It's central to our whole national experience. If you're not focusing on that, you're not really talking about American political life. I regret it, but it's something that we have felt we've made progress over many, many years, but it turns out we really haven't. So bear with us as we sort of confront the realities that we're being presented with.
I'd also think that yes, I guess it has a lot to do with whether you think that people are equal or not, and now it's shifting to this. Well, to this notion that people are not equal, and I would probably also include women, for example, in there, and all kinds of groups in addition to the racist question. And this backlash of masculinity and so on, that just brings me to this. There was an interview with a German cultural scientist, Klaus Teweleit, the other day, and he recommended that to refrain from using the grand word understand. And to quote him further, it would be more appropriate to admit that we are dealing with something unfamiliar, possibly a new way of perceiving reality. So as a result, neither of our proven analytical tools nor our old forms of politics might work as a response. And I was wondering, would you agree with that? And if so, how should we analyze or respond to or understand such a reality in order to change it? Because so many people we are all looking at this unfolding every day, and it's really beyond understanding.
Well, I think one of the keys to all this, and once again, I really don't claim to be an expert in this, but and many people have said it, people are looking at fundamentally different realities, and was Donald Trump, a big question is, was Donald Trump, basically is he an internet phenomenon? Could he have ever been elected before the rise of the internet, and basically the elimination of what is often called the gatekeeper. What was there was a certain standard of veracity. You could say it wasn't that great, but it was a certain standard that you had to meet in most of the U.S. press, and that has just completely fallen apart. You can get any information that you want online, and you can find any opinion that you want confirmed. And I think the sort of paradigmatic example of this is obviously vaccine information, right? So vaccines, I believe that any empirical evidence shows, are the great triumph of public health, right? They are, very low risk, very high reward. And we are seeing that unravel, and we're seeing something unravel that is it's like anti-Darwinian, right? Not vaccinating your kids, not a good idea from a survival point of view. And we're seeing all that happen because you can access any information that you want. And many people are out there exploiting this, once again, for money. And many are doing it not for money, just for the hell of it, because they actually believe in it. So we're seeing this great breakdown of what constitutes truth, what constitutes empirical evidence. And once you reach that point, not sure. Much of human history, we have lived in that. We don't know what's true. People didn't really know what was true. How would you know? And now we've decided to retreat back to that, which seems extraordinary, but here we are. And so watching that play out in a 21st century context is astonishing, always, once again, especially for a member of the press. But that's a great experiment that we're playing out, and I have no idea where it's going to end.
Will, would you like to?
I mean, I have a lot to say on that, but I don't want to, because it's so much in my head. But we do have a vocabulary to study this, people. I'm sorry to tell you this, but we have a very good vocabulary to study authoritarian political movements. Some of the people in this audience have probably participated in generating some of that vocabulary. The difference is that Americans have an ideology called American exceptionalism, which is that we're just fundamentally different from everybody else. Actually, we are kind of different from everybody else, but not in a good way. American exceptionalism is an ideology that was fostered in the 19th century that suggested that everything that happened in Europe was bad. And Europeans fought wars, and Europeans were beholden to the church, and Europeans were benighted, and so forth. Whereas the United States was the beacon of freedom and liberty and opportunity and slavery. Opportunity. And onward it goes. Well, so we don't learn from, the result is we're very bad at learning from other societies. Lately, of course, some scholars have done a lot of good work on comparative explanations, giving us a vocabulary to how to study what's happening in America. And it has happened elsewhere, and it's happening elsewhere. The authoritarian movement is a global phenomenon. It didn't start 6 months ago. It's been going on for a long time, much of the 20th century, in fact. So we know what to look for. It's just that we're not used to applying those terms to ourselves.
Speaking of authoritarianism, and since we have you here, Will, as an expert on fascism, because the word fascism comes up now to all of our surprises regarding the United States, and there are different opinions about whether the United States already have become a fascist state or not. Historian Timothy Snyder has been calling Trump a fascist, and while there might be not a reasonable definition of fascism, he says he doesn't know any such definition that would exclude Trump. On the other hand, somebody like Peter R. Neumann, who's a professor of security studies at King's College in London, he also recently said, and I quote, "Democracy is dying, but it is not yet completely dead. Fascism would imply that it is already dead. It is not yet dead, not even in America." So you have studied fascism historically. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand that last quotation, because you can have fascists and Democrats still, in the same political ecosystem, contending for survival, essentially. And I mean, it's not often that fascist parties take power. Many countries have had fascist political parties and movements that didn't take power. They can be a problem, but they can be walled off, they can be contained. We happen to be in a situation where an authoritarian ideology has taken power. What, you want to call it fascism or not, it kind of doesn't matter. Let's just talk about what it does. How does it behave? What are its indicators? How would you classify it if you're classifying these things? Is there a mass political party, a mass political movement? Yes. Does it emphasize the nation and the nation in jeopardy? That nationalism is somehow its core ideology? Yes. Is there a set of grievances that have been articulated against an enemy within and an enemy without? Yes. Is that a factor? It is. Is there a charismatic leader who can do no wrong? Check. Has it started to co-opt the institutions of the state? Is there a period of, I used the word the other day, a period of Gleichschaltung, the coordination of a single political party with the machinery of the state? That's happening. Is it anti-science? Is it anti-university? Is it anti-expert? Check. Does it seek to transform a liberal democracy into a one-party state by repressing voting? Check. Is there massive gerrymandering going on? Check. So we don't need to really worry, I think it's actually a terrible waste of time to argue about what word you choose to describe this. Fascism is a perfectly good word, but let's set that aside and actually ask, what are the similarities with previous authoritarian movements? And if the similarities start looking much more compelling than the differences, and there are differences, one of which is an electoral democracy is still actually functioning in America, then I think you can get somewhere. How does it behave? If it walks like a duck, you have to start asking yourself, maybe it is a duck.
Jamaica, you brought a text. Do you feel like reading it, or?
Yes. Well, I thought since I am a writer and I have an argument with myself all the time, and sometimes resolve it in paper, that I would read you something I wrote about what it is like to have this apparition, Donald Trump. It's in my mind, he seems to appear on another screen, not in the screen that I know. So I wrote something, and it begins like this and ends fairly soon. It's as if we are dead and somehow have been given the unheard of opportunity to see the life we lived, the way we lived it. There we are with friends we had just run into by accident, and the surprise in our faces, happy surprise, sour surprise, as we clasp each other close or not so much and say things we might mean totally or say things we only mean somewhat, but we never say bad things. We only say bad things when the person we are clasping so completely is out of our sight, and everything is out of immediate sight, and yet there is everything in immediate sight. The streets so crowded with people from all over the world, and why don't they return from wherever it is they come from? And everybody comes from nowhere, for nowhere is the name of every place. All places are nowhere. Nowhere is where we all come from. The dresses hanging in a store window that are meant for people half my age are so appealing. And the waist of this dress is smaller than my upper arm, and I walk on. The homeopathic combination of vitamin C and bioflavonoids and zinc are on the shelf in the Brattleboro Co-op, and I let them remain there, but in the Brattleboro Co-op are cuts of meat that used to be parts of animals, and these animals were treated very well and given the best food to eat, and that is why they are on the meat shelf of the Brattleboro Co-op. The blue sky and the white clouds are made less so even modified really. When I place them next to the blue of the sky and the white clouds I know exist in the place where I was born and grew up in St. John's, Antigua. Nowhere, nowhere. The long lines in at the airport and the people manning the various portals of entry, and then exit to allow me to attend my oldest brother's funeral, although he was 9 years younger than I was at the time he was born. But how much younger is he now that he is dead? He is dead, and I'm alive in the time of the dead. The time of the dead being the time in which to be alive is a form of being dead. We are dead right now, for we cannot be all our ways that are ways of being alive that is familiar. I can hear Martha and the Vandellas singing back up to Marvin Gaye as he sings, "Close my eyes at night," though to close my eyes at night does not bring sleep or dreams of being loved, and how it came to be that I thought being dead would come about by nuclear bombs, not from something my eyes cannot even see, that very shaded part along the banks of a small stream, which feeds into a larger stream, which feeds all ending in the Atlantic Ocean. That very shaded area is beginning to be filled up with ramps. There were funerals, there were weddings, there were bar mitzvahs, there were meetings I never attended and was penalized. There were evaluations, and I thought hard and did my best to be fair. There were sentences that could not be completed for long periods of time. Bells, all kinds of bells in churches, at dinners, in gardens. When someone was hung at Her Majesty's prison at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. Girls with small bosoms, ladies with large bosoms, men who couldn't stand up straight, the phone ringing because people I didn't know had used them. Men who couldn't stand up straight, the phone ringing, somebody telling me that my mother had died, the fear of using public toilets because people I didn't know had used them before. One thing I could have loved, sailing across the southern Atlantic Ocean from Argentina to Cape Town, South Africa, and making a little detour to the Drake Passage. The wonder of this world, the wonder of this world, and there are no words for it. Every word spoils it. The prison for women on the corner of 8th Street and 6th Avenue, and in it were women who had violated all sorts of rules, scandals, which were political and political. Grace Paley and Angela Davis, a writer of one kind and a writer of another, but thinkers observing the same thing and not being heard, and not being heard is in the land of the dead, where I am now, Jean and Dinah, Rosita and Clementina, walking so closely to someone just to hear what they are saying, and then telling someone else what was overheard so I could make fun of it. The joy of ridiculing someone I didn't know and still will never meet again. There was that time when I told my best friend that if I got married and had children, that he should commit me to an institution for the insane, because this meant I would never be a great writer. And I did get married and had children and never became a great writer. That thing, the great writer, now looks so ridiculous, like a clown or something unworthy of human attention, not garbage, not that at all, something to be, but I was young and didn't understand anything at all, though I knew everything all, and danced in the streets while wearing pajamas that had been issued to me by a cancer hospital, where it was found that I did not have cancer at all, but after I left the hospital, I continued to wear the pajamas, for they had been so comfortable. And having children, how difficult to see that they were not me, and that their comfortable childhood was not mine. And my girl daughter, oh, how she suffered from my confusion, and that world is separated from me, lost forever, because of that thing that came from nowhere. Like the rest of us, it comes from nowhere. China, the United States of America, Antigua, all of them is nowhere, and we are all of us from nowhere, and nowhere is where we end up. It is our destiny, alive but dead, dead but alive. A great divide has fallen on our life, on my life, certainly, and on the way I see the world. In life, there are lots of dead in it. The kingdoms of animals, vegetable and mineral, and all the others, we are all in the living sometimes, but in the dead all times. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question to that. What's the role of literature in times like these?
The role of the tea.
The role of literature
in times
like these.
Well, so much is asked of literature. When you're sick, it might comfort you. When you are dying, it is something people say over you. So the role of literature is always to be literature, I think. I will say one thing, that literature is wonderful, and I'm not an atheist, and the reason I'm not an atheist is because it doesn't have any good literature.
Elizabeth, I have one more question for you regarding your field of expertise. I checked that and saw that emissions, CO2 emissions in the United States, well, this is quite a leap now from what you just said, but emissions from in the United States have been going down continually since around 2000, regardless of whether the government was Democratic or Republican. So I was wondering, do you expect this development to be halted or even reversed under Trump 2.0, or is this a development that can't be stopped by federal legislation? Is there too much money to be made with green tech now? Are there too many jobs in green technologies now?
Well, I mean, emissions in the U.S. have been trending down in a sort of, bumpy way since around 2005, I'd guess. And a lot of that, I mean, this is getting into the weeds, but a lot of that was switching from coal to natural gas. That's what a lot of the source of that is. And what's going to happen now is, a very interesting question to those to whom it is interesting. You have these two trends that are going on simultaneously. One is that solar and wind, which Donald Trump hates wind, he particularly hates it with a passion, and just canceled a project that was 2/3, completed. The turbines were actually up, but in federal water. So you're going to see more and more deployment of clean energy, although that will, slow because of what they're doing. But the other trend, and this is not a Donald Trump-induced trend, but it is AI and data centers, which take a lot of energy. So we are seeing plants stay open, even coal plants stay open, that should close for financial reasons and certainly for environmental reasons, because these data centers are absorbing so much power. We're seeing a big push to build new gas plants, and we're seeing a big push to build new nuclear plants, and we'll see whether that's happened. So this is probably more information than anybody wants, but will things continue to trend down? Quite possibly, but much more slowly than they need to.
And one thing that we've been seeing is, that's also, I'm jumping here now, there are so many questions, and you will have the chance to ask your own questions quite soon. One thing that we've been seeing now is this quite new merger between political power and tech power. And I was wondering, what do you think, how real is the danger that it will be harder or maybe even impossible for any political opponent to win elections against this alliance?
Yes, I think it's very hard. I mean, you can see it. You can see whenever the U.S. government, whenever anyone has tried to take on big tech is now has taken the role. It really is the press in a lot of ways. Whenever someone goes after, Google or whatever, Google, will run something on Google and everyone will see it. So I think it is very, very difficult to separate out our political system and big tech knows this. So it's a really big issue.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, but it's at the same time, there's usually some new surveillance technology within authoritarian regimes. This has happened before. Now it's AI. It's probably going to be bigger and more powerful and stronger, and it's going to be harder to break. But surveillance and in the early part of the 20th century, it was simply the index card. But the index cards became very, very effective ways of knowing who lived where, so that when political power flipped, those index cards were available and certain people could be rounded up. It happened all over Europe in the middle of the 20th century. So doesn't have to be a new technology that is making our era so strikingly different. So the question is there some way to say technology doesn't always have to win? And the answer is, of course that's possible. It's going to be harder every time technology joins with a one-party state, but it can happen. And I would just, we're going to depress ourselves into really desperately needing a drink in about 5 minutes, but it's really important to emphasize that people can change the course of history, and it's happened again and again and again. And the reason that we have two political parties in America, but they're called the wrong things. One is the party of exclusion. One is a party of defining who we're not. And another is a party of inclusion. If you want to know why the term inclusion or diversity has become politicized in America, it's because it's so attractive, and it's so powerful, and it's so effective. It's not because someone is actually feeling like they've been left out. It's because diversity and inclusion and equity are powerful and attractive ideas that can actually mobilize gigantic coalitions. So of course they're being attacked, and of course they're being stigmatized. On the other hand, we have a party of exclusion that's basically saying we want uniformity, homogeneity, hierarchy, gender norms, and white supremacy. So that is an exclusionary policy that's turned out to be very effective too. And if you marry that with big tech, you're in real trouble. And the big tech guys rushed to that ideology in the last few years. So yes, it's shocking, but it isn't over. It isn't over.
Speaking of there's a democracy researcher called Wolfgang Merkel, a German one, and he was quoted recently on public German radio. And he sees 4 barriers that could prevent democracy in the United States from sliding further into authoritarianism. One is the elections, the midterm elections coming up next year in 2026. Resistance from the state, that's 2. 3, court rulings. And 4, that's actually something that we talked about before, money, negative consequences of Trump's economic and trade policies, which might, for example, jeopardize the retirement provisions of millions of people. How optimistic are you that any of these barriers will hold? Or maybe others? Maybe you have other optimistic thoughts.
Not that many, actually. Well, do you want to start on that, or do you?
Well, I do think one of the wild cards, and I'm not an economist, but obviously is the economy. I agree with Will that a lot of, the economic anxiety of the last election was, ginned up and manufactured in a cover for a lot of other emotions. But I also think there's a great deal of economic anxiety in the U.S. and as Jamaica mentioned, obviously growing inequities are a huge issue, and probably we haven't spent enough time talking about that, and that's increasingly true in Europe too, just the divide, wealth divide. So what happens to the economy? I guess one of the questions is, should one be hoping for American economic collapse? I'm not advocating that, but it is a possibility. And what happens to the economy over the next 12 months as the Trump administration does things that every economist would say don't do is a big question mark, and that could potentially get people's attention. But once again, I have no idea how that will actually play out.
Yeah, I think those four barriers are, that's kind of Trump one. That's kind of one-dimensional chess, I think we're in a different place. Elections, the midterms will save us. I mean, maybe they will, but, let's not forget that right now the administration is sending National Guard troops into major cities that are largely, in fact, exclusively Democratic strongholds. Now, will that continue? Yeah. Well, I mean, will the use of violence in the street, or the use of threatened violence in the streets of major American cities continue? The answer is yes. But we saw that Chicago managed to demonstrate enough potential resistance that Trump, took a path of least resistance, and he's, thinking about moving into New Orleans instead. So very interesting. So resistance, unified movement at the local level can work. Yeah. So I think it can go. It can go either way. States same way. California is going to add 5 more people to the Democrats, and Texas is going to do the same thing. So gerrymandering balances that out, and we have some extraordinarily evil governors. I mean, that's the bottom line: is they're participating in all of this. So states aren't going to save us. The courts. I mean, yes, there's flashes of light. A lot of the lower courts are ruling against the initiatives of the administration in a variety of spheres, including tariffs. But we also have quite frankly, a very worrisome Supreme Court that has so far green-lighted, Trump's policies. So I don't know the courts are going to save us, and I just don't know that tariffs are going to bite hard enough to transform the balance. So I wouldn't put those things as where I was most hopeful. I would say that activism and protests and public marches are a good place to start. I think they will begin to happen much more frequently because there is something about a narrative that can capture a narrative of resistance, and that's got to begin. And I think it's just going to have to happen in the streets first.
Jamaica, anything to add?
Well, yes, I would. What would I add? I don't feel as positive as about it as these two, because there goes. Because Americans have a way of telling themselves something that is not true at all, and then going on, living. The greatest thing is this, the ability to oppress groups of people who continue to thrive in some way. And so when the tariffs haven't upset certain people, and so they're all right, then there's this other, they think America is fine. America had slaves, and people thought America was fine. They went to America. An America that had slaves. They went to an America that had segregation. They went to an America and joined it. I mean, it's a very a funny thing. I mean, it might, you know, come back, but there's something really fundamentally schizophrenic and bipolar, whatever you want to call it, about America. The America begins, the American Declaration of Independence, which incidentally is a great document, and if you really read it, you would think a slave wrote it. You would think it was written by a slave, because the expression in it is so appealing about freedom. Only a person who is enslaved could understand this document to write it. But it was written by a person who owned slaves. And so when you talk about our history, which you know so much better than I, that's what I always think of. Yes, it will change. Woodrow Wilson destroyed Reconstruction, the Great Society, all sorts of things change. And then, yet it goes back to something horrible, like, you know, the Vietnam War. No one talks about it, and that it in fact may have helped America to be the way it is today. It just goes from one thing to the next, just sort of like a big show. Let's put on a show. And so, as an immigrant to America, I live in a very liberal state. It has only 750,000 people, maybe less, and Bernie is its senator. It's mostly people who look like you, but they leave people who look like me alone. And and it did not join the 13 states because they were ambivalent about being part of the United States. So I don't have Will's optimism, but I must say that I enjoy it, your optimism. I live in it. I wouldn't live anywhere else but in Will's optimism.
So I'd suggest that we open up maybe to the audience. I expect there will be some questions. Maybe if we could have a little light on the audience so that we can actually see something. Oh, thank you. So the way it works is there are some people to the right and to the left on the aisles. So whoever wants to ask a question has to walk over to one of the aisles and ask a question. Yeah, you can just, or maybe you can just form a line or something, I don't know, just get up and run to the mic. Is there one question there? Yes? Okay, so go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your thoughts and reflections. Several of you have alluded to the fact that what's happening in the United States is indeed horrific, but it's not happening in only the United States, it's spreading worldwide. And Europe is no stranger to it either, we're just a little bit behind. So I'm curious if you have any advice for those of us who are a bit further behind, but no doubtedly will have to face similar types of regimes in the future, what you wish you could tell yourself to do 10 years ago that we should keep in mind. Thank you.
That's a great question.
Take it away.
When people tell you who they are, believe them. And I mean, I don't need to tell a room full of people living in Germany that you know, there are a lot of people loudly telling you who they are. And an adult in the room is not going to come in and save them or change their mind or say, no, you moderate a little bit, pipe down. It's not. So, you have to solve your own issues. We're definitely not in a position of giving advice, but if people tell you what they want to do, you might better off taking them seriously and not imagining that this is just a pandering, because they actually mean it. And it is happening globally, but I'll just point out that in Brazil they've just convicted Bolsonaro. I mean, it can happen. So things are standing on their head at long last, and Americans might start learning from other countries for once.
I wanted to ask you something, the audience. Your authoritarians seem mostly engaged with people from the other parts of the world. Immigrants, and I wonder if there has ever been a debate among yourselves about how Europeans went out into the rest of the world, and the rest of the world didn't seem to have the passport office set up. So you just settled in and took what you liked and did what you liked. So now that these people do, is there an ironical view? Is there a question? Is a debate? And well, we went there, Africa, the Caribbean, the Americas, the number of people that just disappeared by your replacement. We have a replacement theory in America. I wonder if you have ever asked the AFD or whatever they're called such questions. Did you meet? Did Napoleon, when he went to Egypt, meet a passport control person? Is this a conversation you have?
Question from over there.
Hello, is it on? Hello, hello, hello. Oh, there we go. So you are all writers. You care about words. This is your job. We have a president who meanders. He has often word salad. How do you think this affects the youth of America and how people, how language is evolving or devolving, regressing because of this person?
I'd like to answer that, please. Not completely, but one suggestion. I noticed that the New York Times now has, it has a terrible book review. It's not really a book review. It's just asking writers, well, what's on your night table? And of course, nobody, a night table. But they have a list of romance books to read, adventure books to read. It has, and I have noticed this decline in taking literature seriously in a public way in the last few years, coinciding with, I think, Trump, that literature is, there used to be literary people in America, but I think now, there's a proliferation of writing schools, and I myself have participated in it, and I've often told my students, well, I mean, where did Homer go to school? Or where did the Apostle Paul study his MFA program? And so there are all these books being published, but they all seem to be waiting for someone to pick up the rights. And I think that Trump is sort of, his life will provide many episodes.
Oh, well, I would just say, you know, and I think that this is one of the underlying questions of this whole discussion is, you know, cause and effect here. And, you know, the decline of reading, I would like to blame it on Donald Trump, but I can't. It predates Donald Trump. We are in a, you know, did the internet kill literature, literary, you know, fiction, nonfiction? These are all questions that, you know, we will be debating. But, you know, certainly, you know, certainly the reading skills, we see this in, you know, there was just a report published on reading skills with American kids and just what kids are reading, what young people are reading, and probably even what older people are reading. And the reason the Times does that, I'm not at the Times, but I feel very confident, is because people click those on, and that's what they are reading. So it's a vicious circle, and Donald Trump is perhaps, you know, accelerating that feedback loop, but he is also perhaps a product of that. You know, we elected a, you know, sort of verbally incompetent. What was the last book Donald Trump read? It might have been Mein Kampf, actually, yeah. But anyway, he has a very, very, very small reading list. And someone should ask him, when was the last time you read a book? It would be a fascinating question.
He would maybe answer with the ballroom that he's building right now.
His own book. Is it?
His own book.
The ballroom.
The deal, yeah. I don't even think he read his own book. Yeah, it was written by someone else. That was ghostwritten.
I'll just say it to a slightly humorous vein. You know, I wish I'd give an arm to be as good a writer as these two writers, but I do teach and I do read a lot of really bad writing. But you know what happened last year? All the students' writing suddenly got really good. They suddenly figured out how to fix all of their grammatical mistakes. The citations are a little weird, but the writing, they're nailing it.
I think it's ChatGPT. It's ChatGPT.
Next question over there, please.
Hello, I'm from Berlin. I'm here from a high school. I spent a year now in America, and I really fell in love with the country. And I do want to go abroad there and want to study there after my high school diploma. And my question now for you is, how far do you think Trump will go now? Like, because we already know that he's like a difficult person. I think everybody agrees on that. But like, how far do you think he will take his journey now? Because he already sells 2028 Trump hats. Do you think there's any way he would possibly like go for a third term or make even more, like war threats?
Boy, I thought we were trying to do the cheerful ones here. We don't know. I mean, if we could predict, I mean, I think we've been wrong at every turn. You know, I would like to think that there are certain constitutional norms that are actually more than just habits, but actually are laws that everyone will recognize. We do have a constitutional amendment that that disallows a candidate to run for a third term. We did have one president who ran for a third term and ran for a fourth term, and I suspect Trump would love to have at least four. So that he could do one up on Franklin Roosevelt. But it's just impossible to know. And I wish I could say, oh, it's definitely going to be fine in 4 years. I mean, it's going to take, I'll be honest with you, I think it's going to take a generation. Best case scenario, it's going to take a generation to rebuild what we've already lost. And it, you know, so come to America and get started. We could use all the help, you know.
Do you think, like, it will affect like student visas for people? Because I already heard, I want to really go there, but like when he says like there will be no like people from abroad studying because we need to focus on American people, I find that really disturbing.
I mean,
there's certainly been a lot, you know, there's been a lot of talk, and I can only say I have a kid who teaches at a high school, and they were expecting a lot of kids not to show up from overseas, and I think he said only one kid didn't show up. So I think that actually there are still many student visas being given out, and most people who you know, were admitted to college as foreign students did get visas and are there right now, if that's any encouragement.
and American universities have been drawing people from around the world for decades, and for good reason. They are an extraordinarily dynamic, places, and so do come and bring your friends, and in order to demonstrate that despite all the headwinds, people still want to study in American universities, and that they can't be just crushed under the heel of the latest, leader, capital L.
Some more questions over there?
Yes. I would once again thank you for coming here and sharing all your interesting opinions on this topic. And my question would be, what are your opinions on the development that most modern leaders, especially in the USA, have been about born in pretty much the same decade as many of the last US presidents, for example, have been born in the 1940s, and that has not changed, and what you think about there being genuine fears about the last 2 US presidents dying in office?
What?
It's an age question.
Yeah, the gerontocracy.
What about the age of our leaders?
Bernie, yeah.
Yeah, real youth movement there. Let's get Bernie in there. I mean, it's terrible. And the Democratic Party needs to have a youth movement. It does have a youth movement. There are lots of young people. There are also lots of young people in the Republican Party. And one of the shocking things, and I'll say this because we're all among friends here, but the Republican Party, in my view right now, is the party of ideas. They're terrible ideas, but they have ideas. And they have a lot of young people who are tempted by them. This is this nightmare scenario. So the problem with the Democratic Party is that it's too centrist, and that young people who are on the left are really on the left, so they don't feel like they have a home. So the youth that might save democracy is somewhat alienated from democracy for a lot of the reasons that Jamaica pointed out. So this is a real puzzle, and it's a real puzzle.
Elizabeth, no? Okay, next question?
I'll go quickly. Thanks again for your opinions. I just was wondering, why do you think that public opinion in the States and also in Europe, we can notice, is becoming so divided and so polarized? What's a sort of more, if you have in your mind, a more underlying cause or phenomenon that is bringing around it? Because it's not just, let's say, a tit-for-tat play. I think there's something a bit more structural happening. And you pointed to technology at some point, I think, during your intervene, and just curious to hear your thinking, and if maybe three-party or multi-party potential in the States could mitigate a little bit this polarization. Thank you.
Are we polarized? Go.
Well, and I mean, in the social sciences, there's this concept of group polarization, where if you're exposed to, consenting opinions all the time, you actually tend to move farther, to one side or the other. And as the internet was developing, and people made the point that you could now go to the news source you wanted that confirmed your opinion, and there were, pretty robust predictions that this was going to encourage group polarization. Can I say that that is the reason? No, I cannot, but it certainly has been borne out, that people just go and hear themselves, the echo chamber effect. And, in the US, that's been accompanied by all sorts of other phenomena. Someone wrote a good book called The Great Sorting, and people have moved to different places. Urban areas are blue and rural areas are red, and we've managed to actually, the two parties have finally separated. There was a famous plea in the 50s. You guys, from the American Political Science Association, you guys are too close. We can't even tell the difference between you guys. You really need to define who you are. Well, now that they have, although some people would say they're still too close together, but people sorted themselves into these groups, and that's a phenomenon that's going to be studied, I'm sure, in universities, if they still exist, for generations. But I think there are, once again, a bunch of loops going on here, and but I think it turns out, I want to say I was extremely skeptical. I wrote a review of a book about group polarization many years ago now and sort of poo-pooed it, but I have to say it has completely come true.
We're all eating some words here, over these years. Polarization works. That's why it's happening, because it works. You can make money off of it. You can get elected off of it. Technology is driven essentially by people taking more and more extreme measures or following their passions and then being looped into further alienation. But I also, just on a different level, I think, what Betsy was pointing out, we do have a two-party system, but we only have a two-party system. In Europe, most European states have a parliamentary system, and that means that you have a range of political parties. In America, sometimes I shudder to think what the range would be, but there would be a range. Like, we would actually have a left-wing party, which we really don't have in America. We really just don't have. And so polarization, I think partly, and I'm not a scientist of this, but I think it's partly the fact that there's only two. So they're just pulled apart by the most extreme and well-funded voices within those two parties.
I just want to add one factoid that I've always found very interesting is if you look at the shows, the TV shows that Democrats and Republicans watch, they take the top 20 shows for Republicans, the top 20 shows for Democrats, they're totally different shows even. So that's the level that we've reached in the States at this point. I don't know if that's true here.
Next one.
So my question is about the splitting society. And yesterday I listened to an American and he suggested that, like, it's a bit weird that, like, nationalism and being proud of, like, the country and what we've accomplished together would be, like, the solution against populism and, like, the huge splitting in society. And we in Germany think this is, like, really absurd. But what do you think about that statement?
Okay, you want to say anything on nationalism?
No. Oh, no,
It's okay. I mean, look, I'm just going to say this because it's just hanging there, but it's it's wild that we sort of want the Germans to be a little more nationalistic so that they can say, democracy actually functions pretty well here. We can be proud of this. It's been 75 years. We're like, Germans, be quiet. But Germany has a great story to tell about democracy and how it works. Now it's under stress. All democracies are, but it's holding up very well, and ours isn't. Nationalism has been a blessing and a curse for the United States. It's having a strong national identity has often been, a kind of binding agent that has given people a sense of, passion and belief in the country, et cetera. It's also been the fuel that has fueled endless wars, some of which Jamaica was referring to. Conquest and militarization. So it's not great. I'm not sure. So I agree with you. I think intense nationalism as a solution to polarization, no.
Well, so is there one more? Yeah. Okay. We have time for one more. Thank you.
Well, we've all been watching, or I have been watching Donald Trump for more than 10 years now. And what I've heard throughout that entire period of time is what a despicable, horrible person he is. And I agree with virtually all of it. What disturbs me is that the Democratic Party, I think, has been inadequate in their resistance. We profess to be a party of inclusion. I recall a previous candidate dismissing the core base of the Democratic Party as deplorables. Our most recent Democratic president said to a young black man, "You can't be a black man if you're not voting for me." Where is the criticism of the Democratic Party? Where's the explanation for the inadequacy of the party? Because it seems to me that they couldn't have done much more to assure the victory of Trump than what they did.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of criticism of the Democratic Party. I'm not sure that that's what we're really lacking. I mean, there was a joke that was making, the rounds before the election, and it's somewhat vulgar, but it was like basically, the hostess is going down the aisle of the plane, saying, "What do you want? Do you want, the ground glass or do you want the chicken? And those are your options. These are the options that we have. And so to blame, and to say, and the country chose ground glass. That's what they chose. So, to say that it's, I personally, once again, I'm speaking as a person here, not even as a journalist, but as a, individual. I certainly can think of many, many criticisms to heap on the Democratic Party. But as was said, as Will said, Donald Trump told us who he was, and the country elected him. And I don't really think it's actually fair to blame the Democratic Party for all of their problems for what happened.
It would be a malpractice of me not to note that there's an excellent scholar of the Democratic Party and the future of the Democratic Party who's going to be giving a talk on this very topic at the American Academy in Berlin. Jacob Hacker, I think he might even be here tonight, and he's going to answer all your questions about the Democratic Party. What's the date of your talk, Jacob? October 6th, American Academy out in Wannsee. Please come, because he was going to sort this question for you.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for your questions. So you go and have a drink with him now.
Meet you at the bar.
And everybody else, go and grab a book. There are books by all three of our panelists tonight here. I checked the bookstore outside. There are not many. So I recommend you go grab a book, have it signed, and then have a drink afterwards. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having you.